Once a month, Paula Pant, host of the Afford Anything podcast, answers voicemail questions the listeners send in. Here's one now.
Hi, Paula. This is Laura. I've been following you since we bought our 3-family, where we're currently living on the bottom floor. I just got a tenure track job that would have my toddler and I commuting an hour each way. So we're deciding between converting the building to 3 condos or buying a house closer to my job and keeping the multifamily as a rental property. The building is just outside a major metropolitan area. It's a very family-friendly community on a peninsula. But with the sea levels rising, we can't really think about this property as a long-term investment in terms of equity. I really think the building is going to go the way of Katrina and Sandy, and our town isn't doing anything to stop the sea levels. So after many Google spreadsheets, we're estimating that we would make about $2,800 a year if we kept the 3-family after taxes and expenses, renting out the 3 floors. And if we sold it as condos, we think we could make $226,000. But we still have to figure out some details like condo reserves. We're also not sure how the mortgage company would deal with changing a multifamily into condos, so we have to do a little bit more research on that. But we also have a timing issue. Our second floor tenants are moving out in September, so it'd be ideal to clean the place up and sell it then, somehow with one other unit so we could pay off the mortgage and they wouldn't have to worry about the conversion. But it's also when I'm starting my new job, and I'll be making about $70,000 a year. But I don't have a track record of making a lot of money recently because I was a grad student. So we're wondering, should we keep the property for a few months in order to have another source of income that could help us qualify for a mortgage on a new home? We're thinking, how difficult will it be to sell 3 condos and somehow buy a new home and then start a new job? But mostly we're just wondering if we're thinking about this correctly or if we have some kind of major blind spot that we're not thinking about. So we appreciate your thoughts and any insight that you have. Thank you.
Hey, Laura, first, congratulations on your tenure track position. That's awesome. That's huge. So I'm really happy for you. And sorry to hear about your town. That sounds terrible. The thing that you said about how you think there's another major disaster impending and nobody's doing anything about it. That's, yikes. I don't know what to say other than, ugh. And finally, I just wanted to apologize for not being able to get to your question before September. The questions that we have in the queue have been building up for a while. So right now we have, at this point, it's running between a 3 to 4 month lead time. Again, it depends on the topic and it depends on a number of factors. We don't take them entirely in chronological order. Erin, my assistant, sorts through all of the questions for me and then makes recommendations about what show to slot it into based on alternating the Ask Paula real estate episodes with the Ask Paula general personal finance episodes, and then also based on applicability to the greater audience and so on and so forth. So at any rate, I try as best I can to get to all of the questions. But as you've heard, I spend a long time answering each question, so I only get to about 4 questions per episode. And so that has all resulted in some fairly long lead times. So my apologies for not getting to this prior to September. And so I'm sure you've made a decision based on about in terms of timing wise, in terms of that aspect of your question. But I, of course, would like to address the rest of your questions. So here are a couple of things to think about. First of all, you mentioned, and I think you probably can guess the first thing I'm going to say, which is you mentioned that you'd make $2,800 per year if you keep it. That is the money that you would make right now with a mortgage. So my first question is, if you owned this free and clear, how much would you make from it? And conversely, if you were to sell it off as condos and make $226,000, what would you do with that money? So what is the other alternative? Would you put that $226,000 into index funds? Would you use that $226,000 to buy a different property that you would own free and clear? Would you use that $226,000 to buy a different property that you would take out a mortgage on and use as a rental property? What would you use the $226,000 to pay off loans? Would you use it to buy some other type of business? So the first thing that I want to know is the comparison. What alternatives are we comparing here? And what type of money are we looking at within each of those alternatives when you remove financing from the question so that you can compare asset to asset? So that's the first thing that I would want to know. Second of all, actually, the first thing that I would want to know would be a zoning question, because depending on your municipality, you may or may not be able to actually make the condo conversion. So that's actually the first thing that I would want to know is this feasible based on zoning and permitting? If not, it's all a moot question anyway, but it is an interesting thought exercise. So, okay, the third thing I would want to know is, realistically, do you have the bandwidth for this right now? Because making a condo conversion, which is just a paperwork and bureaucratic nightmare, while also starting a new job and also moving, like, all of those are very big projects. So you can certainly do all of them, but, do you want to do all of them at the same time? It just goes to you can do anything but not everything, and not all at the same time. So perhaps you might decide to do a condo conversion later down the road, but it might not be a bad idea to defer it for a year while you're settling into your new job and dealing with all of the hassles of moving yourself and your family to a new personal residence. Now, one thing about your situation that I think is very good news is you're cash flow positive by $2,800 a year. So what that tells me is that you have a pretty decent buffer. Like, you're unlikely to be in a major cash flow bind. And it sounds as though that 2,800 figure, when you calculated it, you've already factored out repairs, maintenance, capex, vacancies. It sounds like you've already factored all of that out, and that's the amount that's still left over. Since you do have that nice cushion, that nice buffer, it means that you seem to be, based on what you've told me, in a relatively low-risk situation for having to make some type of less than ideal decision because of a cash flow issue. I am going to assume that you also have some type of an emergency fund that's specifically for the house itself. So with all that being said, you seem to be in a good position. There doesn't seem to be any urgency around selling the house or making the condo conversion. So, if the zoning and permitting allows it, the condo conversion may not be a bad idea, given that you don't want to hold on to this in the long run. But that being said, the condo conversion isn't imminently necessary. You can delay that by a year. Now, I know that you mentioned that if you sell it as condos, you would use that money to buy a property, a personal residence that's closer to where you live. But again, you also mentioned that you'd be getting $226,000 from it. You don't need that much money in order to buy a personal residence. You don't need $226,000 unless you're, either making a very substantial down payment or just buying a house in cash outright, depending on property values in the area that you're looking at. So I guess the other question that I would ask is, depending, and I don't know what your numbers are in terms of your personal budget, but you've been a grad student until recently, so you're certainly accustomed to living cheaply. If you were to continue living at a grad student standard for the next couple of years and save a significant chunk of what you're making, could you or could you not, and I don't know this because I don't know the prices in your area or the type of personal residence that you're looking for, but could you save up enough money to be able to buy a home for yourself without doing the condo conversion? That's, I guess, the final question that I would ask. And if you could, how long would it take? Would it take 2 years? Would it take 4 years? Yeah, how soon do you want to buy a personal residence? So there are a lot of moving pieces to this, and it's not entirely a financial question, or at least it's not entirely an investing question, because the tricky part about this question is that it necessarily blends your personal residence and your personal lifestyle and desires with investing decisions. And that always gets tricky because when we're asking a pure numbers question, should I invest in X or Y, then it's fairly easy to run spreadsheets and start assessing the pros and cons between asset A and asset B. But when we're asking questions about an investment property in the context of how it relates to a owner-occupied personal residence or any other type of personal lifestyle factor, well, then we're no longer comparing an investment to an investment. Now we're comparing an investment to a lifestyle decision. And that means that this is not just a money question. This is how soon do you want to buy a personal house, and how necessary is this condo conversion in terms of allowing you to do that? That's the other baseline question. And if the answer is that you want to buy a personal house and this conversion is absolutely necessary in order to do so, well, then you have your answer.
Hey, did you enjoy this excerpt from the Afford Anything podcast? Then be sure to subscribe to Paula's YouTube channel. Not only is every podcast episode and Ask Paula question released here on YouTube, other creative deep thought videos are created just for you. Remember, you can watch anything, just not everything. Fill your YouTube viewing time with more videos to make you think and grow so you can afford anything. Go ahead, hit that little red subscribe button. We'll take care of the rest.